Well, you may be wondering, how old does something have to be vintage? Now, vintage is not antique. So, like, if you have something that's older, you can't necessarily sell it as an antique, but a lot of people like vintage. Vintage, all it means is as age. It's just a term. There's different definitions of it, but for the most part, people want to consider at least 40 years old to be considered a vintage. But a lot of people love vintage even more than antiques because it brings that nostalgic back, memories. Like, I'm 59, but maybe I go somewhere and I remember an old sewing machine or an old set of cookware that my mother had or something, and I want that because it is vintage and brings that nostalgic. So I am actually love vintage. I love it more than antiques because it brings back all the memories. When I was a kid, I didn't like vintage. I thought, ooh, all that old stuff. But now that I'm older, I love vintage. And like I found somewhere the little frog that you put the sponge in. I stuck them in my kitchen. I like to strategically place vintage items if I find them because I want my house to look, for me, I like it more, I don't want to say updated, but more of like a farmhouse type of thing. So I don't necessarily want everything to look vintage, but just our style, because we're kind of like a little bit of whatever we love, because the Bible says to fill your house with precious things. So I like to fill my house with things that I like. So sometimes it's a little of everything. And because I worked in interior design before, I kind of know how to pull it together. But most people do. It's just like your makeup. If you look funny, you kind of fix it. So believe it or not, you're smarter than you think about things like that. But anyway, that being said, if you've ever wondered what vintage is and where to classify it, that's what vintage is. A lot of people have vintage shops on Etsy and I think Bonanza. I don't even know if that's still around anymore, but there's different places you can go and on Facebook Marketplace. So if you're looking for vintage, check out some of those places. Or if you have a bunch of things from, say, your old, I don't want to say old, but I say older people, I guess I'll put it that way, and that you've collected for some reason. Maybe you have an older aunt or somebody that gave you stuff and it's not your thing. Put it on Etsy or Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something, because there's a lot of people that love it. So, with that being said, if you have wondered what vintage is, that is what they consider vintage for the most part, at least 40 years old. And I guess I'm vintage because I'm 58. Okay, guys, remember, big or small, you too could be a backyard farm. God bless.